Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Hooper, and I would like to call to order today's Planning and Zoning Board special meeting for March 18th, 2022. The time is 2:10, and I'll point out that we have 7 board members present, which constitutes a quorum, and we are able to have a meeting. However, today's meeting, we will not be taking any action, as it will be a discussion with staff regarding the small area plans and some concerns and just general conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, starting at my right with Ms. Sonny. And please go ahead and make sure at this time, let's go ahead and make sure that our microphones are on. And it's a good time to remind us all to speak clearly and directly into our microphone as we are being recorded, live streamed.
Just once.
As well. Thank you.
Philip Shoemaker.
Julia Latham.
Jack Farrell.
David L. Zamora.
Matt Jones.
And Darren Birch.
Darren Birch, stay with the staff. So with that, we're going to begin the special meeting to discuss the small area plans. Darren, do you want to go ahead and take the next step?
I will start off. First of all, we gave you some new handouts, and the handouts are really their excerpts from some of the plans. I know we're going to be focusing a lot on the illustrations and the plans, some of the renderings or some of the proposed plan options. And so instead of going back and forth within your individual plans, I thought it might be easier to take these out so we can look at them. You have 2 sets. You have one that starts off with party block diagram. That's from the most recent small area plan for Village Place. And the other one, which starts out low intensity plan option, those are excerpts from the plan from Public Workshop number 2. And the reason I brought those along is to show what happened between Public Workshop number 2 and the final, and I say final in air quotes, concept plans for Village Place. So they will illustrate some of the changes that we made along the way. Secondly, getting on to what we're here for today is really, we've been working on these plans for over a year. We've had various public engagements. I've gotten a lot of direction from council to end up where we are today. And what we're wanting to do is move these plans forward. Hopefully relatively soon. I would like to move these plans forward, and I'm going to be asking the Planning and Zoning Board for a recommendation on these plans. So as part of that, I want us to get into discussion on some of the concerns that we've heard out in the community, some of our individual concerns, some questions that we might have. So as we move forward towards your recommendation as a group, I want to talk through some of the issues in a format like this. We're not at a public hearing. We're not at a public comment period at this point. We're going to get there, but I want to do the hard work right now on this and just start to talk about it. So that's where we're going to start with. And what I want to start with on Village Place is I want to start with hold on. I'm gonna have to move between documents here. I want to start with what is called the recommended plan, and then we'll kind of work our way backwards. I hope you're not getting dizzy like I am. What's that? The preferred build-out plan. Okay, so we have, within the Village Place plan, we have the preferred build-out plan, which is what's shown on the screen right now. And then what we have are what's called the high-intensity and low-intensity plans. I wish I would have changed that to Plan A and Plan B, because people get focused on the high and low. My mistake. The high and low in the plans reflect what we saw as a community during the public workshops. So they essentially are what we were looking at during this planning process. So and we kept them in here as is to show, kind of for the record, what we had considered and what we didn't do as far as the preferred layout. So they're in there for, kind of the record to indicate, yeah, we had this plan for low intensity, we had this plan for high intensity, and after talking through it, this is where we ended up as the preferred build-out plan. Now, why this is important when we talk about the preferred build-out plan itself is the preferred build-out plan is going to control form and the land use ultimately in these areas. So we have to be on relatively the same page with this preferred layout before we can start adopting plans and codes to implement that. So with that, we can start out, if we want to talk about this preferred plan, and just start talking about any concerns, and then we can go into, Jack thankfully put together a document so we can, with some concerns that we can talk through some of those issues and some of the concerns that he's hearing, and then some of the concerns that you as individual members may be hearing. So with that, should we start with the preferred plan, or should we start with the high intensity and low intensity plan leading up to this? What would you prefer?
I think the preferred plan seems to be the logical starting point, rather than backtrack into high and low density. And in fact, those words kind of tend to get people.
They inflame people, yes.
I know exactly. Yeah. I think the preferred build-out plan is the reasonable place to start.
All right, let's start there then. Let me see if I can zoom.
I have a question as you're getting there, Darren. So what you just described, and it's described also in this recommendation section of informing the form-based code plan from this document. I mean, one of the things I'm still trying to get a filter for is there's a lot in here, but I mean, what is the most important things when you say preferred build-out plan is going to kind of govern form and layout? Like some of this seems to me not necessarily relevant to what the form-based code is going to look like. It's a little more maybe its vision and what it should look like, but the form-based code isn't going to necessarily dictate how things get, where roads are going to go and that kind of thing. So if I have a preference on that, it doesn't seem like it makes as much of a difference as what's, for me to know what's actually going to be in a form-based code, and then to back out from there of, well, we need to decide if facades and streetscape and some of those things and how they're characterized in here, like that, in my mind, is kind of like first importance. And I'm trying to figure out how some of the like specifics of the layout are really going to make a difference in terms of when we start putting, reviewing what that form-based code is going to be. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and what you're seeing with the pattern here is what would be reflected in a form-based code. So what you're showing is a strong street presence with these buildings again near to the street. So as part of the form-based code, you get really concerned with what that building looks like and what its relationship and the setback is to the street. So that pattern that you're seeing is what we would, when we start to work on that, on the form-based code, is how that form-based code will come together. So the form-based code is going to say we want a minimum or a maximum setback of 10 feet.
Right.
Same thing with the type of building. So you see the images of these buildings, kind of the structure. This is not a single-family structure. So when we do the form-based code, what it's going to say is a mixed-use or office-type building in that area. You don't see a single family. So if you go over here to the residential infill, these boxes like this, that shows a single-family type of unit. So whether that be, when we start working on the form-based code, the single-family, whether it be a villa lot, a cottage lot, or I forget another type lot. So that's what's going to be, that's what you're going to see in the form-based code. You'll also see a street type. So there's going to be a street type, whether it be a residential street type, and whether that be a commercial street type. And then what we'll start to talk about is where do we want active building frontage at the street level. So we want all this nice fenestration, this nice windows, so as people are walking by, they can see what's going on in the building. So we start to talk about active building facade. So, and I can see that really in this core area where you have this crossroads. And you're right, can we dictate where the road is? It becomes very difficult because we don't have an effective official mapping statute in the state like I used to have. Like, we'd come together like this, I'd map all those roads, and then we'd be fine. They'd have to reflect it. We had a different, I had different statutes back in Wisconsin. So what we can do with this, and especially when we get down to Pioneer South, because you're not adding too many roads on this. In Pioneer South, we're showing roads, and that road creates a vision for a potential developer to come and say, oh, look at this pattern. They've thought through it. They're expecting it. Now now it would be easier for us to implement that. In Village Place, we have the luxury of controlling a lot of land in the Village Place area where the roads are going through. So right here, I mean, we already have Power Plant Road that comes through somewhat, and then we have the Public Services Facility where we're showing potential roads coming through. So we have the ability, because we are the landowner there, to dictate that kind of pattern because we're the landowner. Where we start to run into issues right here is where the county ambulance facility is, and there's some private parcels over here. So we have to work with that, but by having a road frontage come through here, if there's a potential developer coming through, there's an advantage to having that road frontage coming through, especially at a corner lot.
That's helpful. So is it, I'm thinking of it kind of almost as an overlay is what's in the code. So it's showing
yes.
like this street is going to have this guidance because of this is where your
Yes.
frontage is going to be.
Yes.
And this street is a different type of street.
Yes.
So there is a map
Yes.
in there.
Yes, there will be a map. You'll be getting that.
Oh, okay.
You're getting down the road.
Well, but I guess for me, the way my mind works, I'm kind of, because it's so much, I'm kind of distilling, okay, so how do I ask the questions that are really helpful to where we are going and not just, like, there are things I like or don't like in here, but I'm trying to decide what's worth it.
That's why you're an engineer. I'm a planner, you're an engineer. We think differently.
Right, that's right.
Is it safe to say that form-based codes, or I think we've talked about this plenty of times, I'm sorry, but just reiterating. So form-based codes being the process and really the mindset and kind of the rules of really the zoning process that will go forward from these plans, right?
Correct.
So I was in an area just the night before last where, in Richmond, where very much was influenced by form-based codes. A lot of green space, a lot of the frontage of the buildings were similar, and you couldn't really tell where the grocery store was, where the hotel was, and really where the multifamily was. It looked like the same type of buildings, and of course, that is not Pinehurst. And so when I was reviewing that and trying to take note of all of that, you know, it kind of clicked in my head that the form-based codes being the process, and as we implement it into these small area plans, we will look for ways for it to become Pinehurst. Is that fair to say, or am I
Design
wrong in saying it's not like it's one set? If you see one area that has implemented form-based codes, that's not to say that that's what we're going to end up looking like here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We have a multiple-step process that ends up decision-making.
Well, everything is bespoke really to the area. So the codes that we're coming up with are going to be based on some of the input that we've gotten and are supposed to be reflective. That's why when you look through the small area plans, you saw those images. So remember those images where we talked about what we like and what we don't like, those precedent images? Those are used to develop the architectural standards in the form-based code.
So when we talk about our unique community, and we talk about some of the roadblocks that we have in implementing a plan like this, in a lot of ways, we can use form-based codes as a tool to maybe answer some of those concerns, is what I've always viewed it as. Could be helpful to the process. And I'm just trying to figure out kind of, and then back to kind of Matt's point, trying to figure out where the relationship point becomes in our zoning process, and I think that's where we'll get to.
Really what it becomes is the form-based code tries its best to implement the image that you're seeing right there.
Right.
That form, that type of building type. There'll be building types that we have as part of the regulating plan for that. So that's what the form-based, and that's why it's so important to get some general consensus on what that looks like, because when we implement the form-based code, it's going to be very prescriptive. It will be very prescriptive because it's the beauty of the form-based code is it better implements a community vision for an area than does a general Euclidean-based separation of land use PDO like we have right now.
That's really our opportunity with form-based codes as we consider some of the concerns specifically with the mix with residential and commercial in my mind. Okay, I want you to tell me where I'm wrong. I'm not trying to lead you. Okay.
Oh, and one other thing, there's another handout that I gave here, and what this is, as you're evaluating the plans, what I did is I put together what some of our, in the two areas that we're looking at, I put down the comp plan, what the square footage and residential density or residential units were in the comp plan, so what that recommendation was, and then I broke it out by high intensity, low intensity, and preferred layout in the small area plan. So you can see what we did relative. You can always refer back to what the recommendation kind of was in the small area plan to just kind of evaluate it that way. So
Darren,
yeah.
you have designated A through F. Are they specific blocks bounded by streets? Or are they just put down there to?
Those are blocks. So when we start to look at the different blocks and we start to potentially design the form-based code, we can do it. And I think that relates back to the regulating plan because we're going to look at it on a block by block by block.
So it's conceivable that we may see multiple form-based codes. I think that the plan itself gave a vision of the core area. I mean, it had a nice picture of restaurants and so forth. And so for the core area, which would be, I guess,
Right here.
G, H, I, K, and J,
Yep.
there may be a form-based code that reflects the vision or the picture, essentially, that was shown as how that area could be developed. Is that correct?
Yeah, and when we
That
see
would be a different form-based code or slightly different from the other areas within Village Place. Is that correct?
from an intensity standpoint, it could be. I mean, let's hold. I mean, it's all going to be one form-based code, but you might have different intensity standards and potentially different architectural standards as you move down Rattlesnake.
Well, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
So there would be a form-based code that says the commercial infill along Rattlesnake would probably, most likely, the building should look like this as far as setbacks, visibility from the street, the thoroughfare, et cetera. Whereas the form-based code applying to the central area would be more reflective of the picture that was, or the drawing, I should say, that was envisioned. Is that correct?
I think it could, but I think that the architectural standards, if we have architectural standards, yes, I think you're right. When we pair that with active street frontage, so that active street frontage from the images that you were thinking about, that's exactly what we're talking. That's what you're talking about. That will be in the code, but when you start to see where that active frontage is, that will incorporate additional architectural requirements.
Now, the form-based code for residential infill, for example, would contemplate different multifamily, for example, townhouses, and so forth. So that form-based code that reflects for that area is different potentially than the form-based code across the street. Is that correct? Well, you wouldn't have a form-based code envisioning commercial buildings in a residential infill area, or are we going to combine that with zoning?
I think we look at the zone, because the underlying zoning, because we're gonna apply the form-based code as an overlay. So what's gonna happen is the underlying zoning, we're gonna have to fine tune some of the underlying zoning, but whether that be all VMU, and we might have to make some adjustments to the VMU, we're working on that. Or do we change it, the VMU, the NC to VMU, things like that. But the form-based overlay, when you start to look at the architectural requirements, I think it'll become more clear. We're getting a little bit into it, but I think it'll become more clear when when we're all sitting and looking at the form-based code, because it's hard for me to explain it all other than conceptual level stuff.
That's this question to you. So is the concern, do you think, the stark differences between the commercial and the residential settings? Is that maybe the concern overall, or what's the concern of the result?
No, it's not a concern. It's just that I think that from a less intense development going more towards the core of this area, which is a more intense development, you may have different criteria in the form-based code. Is that correct?
Good.
So you may have a form-based code that shows the commercial development along Rattlesnake less intense looking than that which you would see in the commercial, the core area. Is that correct?
Yes, based on relating back to that active street frontage.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So that would be the concern of different looking commercial applications, is that right?
Well, it isn't a concern, it's just that when you, I think that, I trust Darren to do this.
Oh, right.
The form-based code will be able to reflect a transition from less intense to more intense
Oh, true.
as you do block by block, is that correct?
Well, and that was going to be my question, really.
That's a question I have to write down. And that's something, once we start to look at the regulating plan, that's where we might have to do some fine tuning on some of that, so.
Because I've seen form-based codes that go almost block by block.
Yeah, that gets more
It's a
expensive.
little tricky, I'm sure, but,
That gets more expensive.
Well, the reason I was asking for the concern is because that was kind of my thought process was, this also gives us the opportunity to address that as well, right? And talk about the blending of the areas and that type of thing when we talk about
What we're going to do,
standards and.
when we see the regulating plan, that is going to control block by block basis the type of building that can be there. Commercial, residential, trying to think of some of the other live-work units.
you know, whatever.
It's going to be very prescriptive. And then for that, there's going to be some design standards for those type of units. Where it's going to get hazy and where we can't do much about is the single-family residential. That's why when you look at this plan, you don't see a lot of single-family residential in this plan because we can't really control the quality other than stuff in the historic district. So that's why, as part of this process, if you look at the low intensity and high intensity plan for Village Place, right here around Block B here, between Block B and C, we showed a lot of residential in that area. We showed a lot of single-family residential in that area. When we were talking with council, what we said was, well, I mean, that might be better for office. That might even be better for medical office. So we changed the land form from if you look at the previous two, and we can pull those up.
Yeah,
You remember that?
yes, I do.
I mean, because you can't,
State regulations against.
State law.
state law. So if you look at, like, right here, we'll go here. Here's the low intensity plan. So you can see the low intensity plan. We showed all residential in here. So you see that in that block where my cursor's going. This is the low intensity plan. And let's just go over this along Magnolia. We also showed single-family residential along Magnolia and between the brewery and that office building on the corner. So you can see what that kind of looked like. The low intensity had lesser buildings, lesser sized buildings. It didn't contemplate a potential hotel in this area. And then when we moved up to the high intensity plan, still you can see we elevated the building type at the crossroads. We maintained the single family layout along Magnolia. And then it looks like we created a single family attached townhomes. So we moved that to single family attached townhomes. So after we met with council, after these plans, that's when we changed to that preferred layout that you're seeing, that changed it to commercial. And Jack, what you were talking about before is the form-based code, here's your active street frontage.
Right.
That's what the code has to reflect. In
Right.
order to make that happen, we have to relate it by active street frontage to get this type of fenestration, this type of character. Now here's the other one you're talking about, Jack. This was the detail of that area. So you can see when we come back with the form-based code, and you can see the change. So you saw before when it was single family, this is where we show the commercial, and I know there's some concerns about the commercial. We can change it. That can always change back to the previous one. And if you look at the previous rendering that I handed out to you, you'll see a different land form in that area. But now when you start to see the form-based code, this is what the form-based code would implement. It should implement this pattern, this linear pattern along the street. And that's what the code will that's what the code will mandate. And that's where what you're not seeing is you're not seeing the character end of it. You're not seeing the character on this plan view. So you're not seeing that. This is just a rendering. This is just a rendering, Sonia. So that's what the form-based code will implement. And then you have priority areas kind of like this where you have that mixed-use building because it's at the confluence of two kind of collector streets coming into the area.
Well, I was surprised that there was no renderings of residential multifamily within the plan. I mean, because I I've been under the impression that, the Traditions lot here across the street will eventually be multifamily at some point in some character, townhomes, I'm not sure which. And I was surprised that there wouldn't be some renderings in the plan showing the preferred or the potential type of residential multifamily that could appear through the form-based code vehicle.
That's a real important consideration.
Although there
for
were,
the form-based-
preferences for the houses, that type of thing, but
I think-
beyond that.
I think that's something that we could do that with the form-based code. We could easily put that type of image. We can look at that for this too, if there's a area that we can add it. I'll make a note.
Darren, I think
I'll
that's
make a
good.
note on that. That's,
Good
you're
point.
right, I don't see that in here, so.
Nowhere.
Is that section F?
Yeah, section F is Traditions across the street,
The go-kart.
the go-kart tracks, yeah, right.
And there's different ideas. I mean, if you talk to Steve Say,
Yeah,
the owner, I mean,
I've talked to him
he has
multiple
different
times.
ideas of what he wants to do with that. I've heard different.
it varies.
Yes. Rattlesnake. Right here.
Whoops, that's why I turned it off. The extension going along
Turn him
there,
down.
coming beside the police department. So that was one area where previously residential was shown, but
Oh,
in the
good point.
preferred build-out. So does that mean that the zoning on that, it's understood the zoning there is changing to not be residential anymore?
Well, the zoning is not residential in this area. This is all Village of Pinehurst property through here. The only place where you really change the residential zoning,
Obviously not where you already have houses.
do you see this? We'll look into. So here's there's the zoning. There is a zoning plan in there, but what we're talking about is really this area here. This is multiple family. This is those apartments that are here, and then there's a residential single family parcel here. This is the area that we would be talking. In order to implement the plan, we'd have to change the underlying.
What are you
zoning.
pointing to? I can't see
Oh,
the
I'm sorry,
pointer.
Jack.
Right
Oh,
there
there
in
it
the
is,
yellow.
okay.
Right there.
And
I
the-
wish the color.
We
Can we
need a
make this
better
cursor
pointer.
red?
Need a
And the
darker
Kelly
pointer.
Road extension, so on the south side where Kelly Road would extend up to Magnolia,
Pardon me.
down to the
Right here?
left. Yeah,
This
where
Kelly
that
Road?
extends, that area right there. So previously, in the options, there was shown residential
Yes, there
on the
was.
south side of that.
There was no, when we took this back to the council, there was no interest at that time of having any type of residential in that area, because we have a lot of green space. We like our green space, so this would just keeps that green space environment. That's where we're showing the potential for an amphitheater. So that's why, so no zoning needs to change in that particular area. The other area where we may need to change it is this area along here. Can you see my cursor? This area along
Churches?
Yeah, because we do show some potential buildings. Now, they could be civic buildings if we need them, or they could be office professional buildings. That, again, it's our property. We control the destiny of that property. So we don't have to change it now for any reason unless we want to.
Okay.
We'll go back. All right, where am I at? Oh, I'm at the wrong plan. Right there. All right, so now we're back on the preferred plan layout. So you can see the building form all along Rattlesnake. The idea along here, with the exception of this relatively new developed subdivision, it was old. It was platted years ago. The stuff along Medlin and Fields here. This is single-family residential. So you see the commercial pattern going along Rattlesnake. You have you'll have more of a nice building, and I shouldn't say, I can't think of the word right now, but you'll have kind of like a significant building here at the corner of McCaskill and Rattlesnake because of the confluence of McCaskill and Rattlesnake. They're two collectors serving the area, bleeding down into the core area. So you have the core area that shows live-work units. It shows It shows another potential. You can see how we're creating crossroads. We're creating a public open space, a public green space in that area, and then going out to Magnolia where we're showing, which I understand is questionable with some, the commercial along Magnolia. We had originally proposed taking this road that you're seeing here that's intersecting with McCaskill, serving the core area, and moving that up and bringing it up to Community Road directly through by the old fire station. When we went to council, they recommended moving the road to this current configuration where it comes in along, that's power plant, I believe, yeah, power plant road. Connecting it that way. So that was another change that council had recommended after our work session, I think in October, or I can't remember when.
So as not to create an easy pass-through, shortcut, et cetera? Okay.
And I think
No,
it
that
works.
makes sense.
What we retained was we're still showing a little bit green space in here, but we're showing a potential pedestrian connection through that area. So you can walk, you can walk up, down Orange from the Village Center area. And I've talked with the owner of that property, and I think there might be some interest, so we'll see. So on this particular image,
We used to own all that property.
pardon me?
The village used to own that.
Oh, I'm aware. I've talked to him. So on this particular image, on this particular potential layout, again, this helps we'll implement this image with the form-based code. So if we need to adjust anything on there, if there's any recommendations on it, I would like to talk about this one right now. And then what we'll get into is we'll get into the pedestrian circulation, we'll get into some of the green space, but this is really the line, this is the plan, a lot of the plan right here. This is the potential future for this area on this plan. So this is really the important document and what we're going to use for the form-based code. So I'm all up for discussion.
Well, I mean, I think I articulated a couple items that were of some concern.
We can get.
But overall, the community, the people that I've talked to, like this build-out plan. They kind of were all upset one way or another over either the low density or the high density because they couldn't figure out the density. And showing the residential in that area, which is civic use right now, was of some concern. So I got a strong feeling that people like this plan in general, particularly the core area, which showed some very attractive potential business / retail / whatever. So all in all, I think that was a good result.
I can review your email. There was a couple concerns about the Medlin Road and Magnolia Road, Kelly Road to the board branch to Magnolia. Do you mind articulating those for us?
And I know where Jack was going on the Medlin Road one at least, because the image that you're probably looking at was from Public Workshop #2, showing the road going through.
Right.
When we had talked with council, they said back that out, and we backed it out. And you can see in the preferred layout that we backed that out. But what we're showing is pedestrian circulation. So if we want to put a sidewalk or something to maintain, so if somebody's walking up and down Medlin, they can walk straight through to Magnolia. So we put that through as a potential. Again, that's our property, so we control whether that would happen or not. But yeah, there is no road. There's no road shown there because there was no interest at the council level. That can always change. We know that. It can always change because we control.
Fine-tune that much later. I know that. Yeah.
Yep.
Effort to kind of hit the roadblocks that we've gotten to make sure we're discussing them. Does this kind of help with those two concerns, Jack? Or
The extensions, yeah, I think the extensions would have to be thought through very carefully before implementation, and I think there's more than sufficient time to do that. I think people were concerned that we'd be giving up public space and public-owned acreage for civic uses, and who knows in the future what civic uses we may have, because this is kind of a civic center right in this area.
I agree.
And we don't want to lose the potential for something
I
in the
agree.
future, whether it be a library, another expansion of a community center, or who knows what.
I agree. I think the other thing that you had mentioned was, this potential extension of Kelly. And, we have had both discussions. Would it be better initially as some type of pedestrian path? I think it'd be great if we could find a way to put a pedestrian path through there. If we ever want to move forward on connecting that with a road, it's mapped as a road. I think it's already dedicated as a road. You're right, there are some grade issues. There's some grade issues in there. And the beauty of it, if you did connect it, good or bad, the beauty of it is it provides, from this area, provides a direct connection out to Midland Road without having to do this.
Down to Rattlesnake in the commercial area, and Rattlesnake down all the way out to the Arboretum and the Village Hall and so forth.
So that's the advantage of it. Again, that's one of those areas too that we control the destiny. I think the best thing, just in the interim, would be to connect that with some type of pedestrian way.
Well, you could do that right now, yeah.
We could do that right now.
Yeah.
And I think that would really add to the circulation system around here.
No, I think this is my non-professional personal opinion, but the left-hand turn from Magnolia onto Rattlesnake is like the most dangerous turn in that area.
Yes, well, look, yeah.
Fine.
It's rough.
And there's some vision triangle issues in that corner too.
Yeah, for sure. And what you're saying about redirecting away from there and having routes for that is positive.
Well, I think also as we kind of move forward and hopefully start following this thing towards some sort of a recommendation and timeline to get there, if there are changes that we want to propose, I think we start having some discussion about some of the specifics that we would want to recommend to council to changing as a recommendation. So that was kind of why I was bringing that up, Jack. If there was any specifics there that we wanted to table up and discuss and talk about the pros and cons, I think that some of those things, as we kind of funnel this thing towards a result, we're going to want to be specific about and say, hey, we want to recommend the plan with these types of changes. It's my mindset anyway. If you guys see that working a little bit different, please speak up. But in some of the concerns, if we want to change them, that's kind of earlier what I had mentioned. Hey, let's start talking about some alternative results and maybe some solutions to do so, because we want to be specific in that recommendation.
I guess there was only two very specific items that I heard. One was, and it can be worked out later, which is whether you want a use for a hotel in this area. And I think that's a discussion item that the council will need to decide as to whether it makes sense to have a hotel use allowed in the core area. And I'd look for him to, think that through. There's pluses and minuses to that, I know. The only other one that's of a little more concern is the change in the boundaries of this area, adding the 3 residential lots that were always part of the 2008 plan, the core, new core plan, the 2010 long-term plan, the 2019 long-term plan, and the initial versions as presented in the public workshop number 2, that they did not include those residential lots.
Correct.
Along Magnolia, and they suddenly, in the latest version, appeared as commercial lots. And that's of a great concern to a lot of people because they do border on existing residential units on Cadell. And those people, that's a built area. And they would then have their backyard be commercial and commercial parking, along with associated lighting and so forth. And the conscious decision that was made all along, to my knowledge, was to break at the street. Now, there's pluses and minuses of breaking at a street, but it was always thought that made the most sense. And I would request that be changed back.
Well, I mean, that's a recommendation, and we need to talk about that as a group again. And specifically, we had this discussion at the council level. We did, because you've seen the previous image that we had and what we showed. So when we were talking about Magnolia and what should Magnolia be in this area, given what we're trying to propose, we had talked, initially, we'd wanted commercial in this area.
You're talking about right there at F.
A lot, between F and G. So
Okay.
between F and G, because of the commercial, what we're proposing to do in here is commercial. We said, okay, let's put commercial along here, let's require the commercial. And then what we did is, we're planners, so we look at vacant lots. When we see vacant lots, we'd like to do some planning. And what happens is, if we put commercial along this frontage here, and given that we're trying to empty what will be there should be a lot of trips coming on this street, we thought, okay, having a single-family residential dump out right here with all the street lights and all, or not street lights, the headlights coming into it, we thought maybe commercial is the better land use going into that area, just given that.
Right, I recall conversations from months ago when we were talking about the the comprehensive plan. And just, when we were just at the beginning of sort of noodling these two areas, discussion of properties there that were mixed commercial, residential, and the conversations at that time were commercial below with residential above, kind of similar to what we currently have in the village.
I think that's the concept. I mean, that would be the concept there. I mean, it could be live-work units, could be mixed use, could be standalone, could be whatever. Again, if that's not what the desire is, we can always flip that back. I'm not.
Well, and with respect to the people that currently live on Cadell and bought their residential lots, looking around them when they bought the lots, they saw that the lots behind them were zoned similarly as residential, with a full expectation that they would, at some point in the future, potentially have residential behind them, but having no expectation that there would be some type of commercial development with parking lot behind them, abutting their property. I think that's, in fairness to the residents that are already there, it doesn't make sense to suddenly impose commercial right on their back step.
Well, we do that, I mean, we're doing that in some areas, but I will.
Try not to
We try
rezone.
not to, but I would indicate that we've not heard from any of those property owners in that area at this
They
point.
know about it?
We do a pretty good job of promoting what we're doing around here. The other thing, I checked some of the ownership. I think two of those are not owner-occupied in that area. I think one in the middle is potentially owner-occupied. We're going to have we're potentially going to have another session with the public, but again, we do a good job of trying to promote what's going on in this community with these meetings, and
Right.
I have a whole project page devoted to this.
I would just, for now, I would note it as a significant concern
I got it.
and worthy of further discussion.
Well, and not that we would want to, but I don't think as a board, we're going to get away from at least addressing those three lots on some level, so in a recommendation. And so it's of consideration. And so let me ask this question. What would be the negative to reverting back to some residential lots for those three lots specifically, or even down Magnolia to a further point?
Well, I think I raised one of them where the crossroad is coming into it. So now you're going to put you're potentially putting a house dead right at this intersection. And you're going to be, is there going to be a different quality of life because the headlights are coming right at you, because we got the brewery there and the late night of that, things like that.
Is that lot centered upon that stoplight? Do we know? Or I don't know if we can see the plots, or who knows, right? But there's no house built on it. I know it's a really small lot. They could do some design changes to the house.
I think that's a concern, but, I think we have to look at this area here. So we look at the area to the north of that. If we don't think that this is the appropriate landform north of that, then there's no reason to retain these as commercial. We should just show them as residential. If we show these as commercial, then I think there is a strong case to consider a commercial building or two in this area. So I think we have to first think, do we think that this is the appropriate landform? I think the reason why we put commercial as the appropriate landform in this area is given what Magnolia is, given what's along Magnolia in this area, being that this, basically this side of the block is all non-residential. So we try, and when we're doing land use planning, we're always trying to look at what's across the street.
Sure.
Always trying to look at that. So that's why we did that.
I was kind of surprised that you put commercial there. I mean, I was under the impression that we wanted some multifamily residential in this area, Village Place I'm speaking of in general.
Yeah.
And that area is sort of prime for residential multifamily, its proximity to the village and its proximity now to a potential core area where there's amenities. So I was under the, in fact, I was kind of surprised to see commercial on that side of Magnolia down that far.
Does that,
Can I write that down?
Sure.
I don't think I've heard, we wanted multiple family in that area.
well,
So-
I'm wondering, to piggyback on what Jack's saying, I'm wondering if that is an area where we want to do the multifamily, again, it could work to do a specific kind of commercial below, coffee shop, just something that is going to have a walkability to it, you know, if this is going to be an area where we're increasing pedestrian traffic, you know, I'm just throwing out ideas, ice cream parlor, something very, you know,
Something neighborhood commercial.
mom and pop, a smaller use, but very inviting, very neighborhood, very, you know, cafe. I don't know.
When we say commercial infill can be, because multiple family is non-residential, it's a non-residential land use. Because it falls under the commercial building code, or it falls under a different building code. It's not 1 and 2 family. So it could, if we want to promote this for multiple family, that's easy to do. I think we can easily do that. But if we don't want it, I need to know, because that's what the form-based code is, say multiple family, mixed use, commercial.
We have a pretty significant multifamily across the street
Oh,
from
I know.
this, or catty corner across the street from this parcel.
But just look at the illustration, or, yeah, if you look at this along Magnolia, these are the lots that we're talking about. So you see me circling? You can see that these could, you see the kind of way the landform is, these could be live-work units, those could be potentially multiple family units. So we did kind of contemplate that with what we're showing on the plan view.
Unfortunately, the artist rendition never showed the not-so-great part of the development, you know, like the parking lots and the cars and the lighting and the everything else. Artist renditions tend to kind of,
Well, here's lighting. Here's lighting right here, Jack. See this
I
street
want to live
light
right there.
Aaron, can you go down one
No
page
street
here?
signs,
So as
no
we-
parking.
as we, no, one more, go down right there. So as we just kind of address this, and this is a great illustration. So today, when we go down Magnolia, we have the residential homes right there on the left if we're heading towards the brewery.
Yep.
And then we have the 3 lots kind of in question there across from the manor
Yep,
and
it's these.
the brewery. Okay, those right there. So in this application, one, we do have some parking behind of this unit, which could further affect the people on that Cadell Road. I think we're only talking about a couple homes, but still, it's of
I think you're
consideration.
talking about 3.
But why would, and this is where your expertise kind of comes into play. Somewhere, there's got to be a dividing line. So right now, we currently have 3 homes sitting there. And so if that's the dividing line currently with those 3 empty lots, what's really the negative about furthering the residential on down the street to a later dividing line? And so I'm just trying to find the net negative of not doing that, if it is of such consequence and concern to many in our community, which I kind of, I do sense that. And so where is the dividing line? Is it there, or is it past 3 lots? Is it even further? And I know that as we look here as what we call the go-kart track, it appears to be like that would possibly be even broken up in some zoning sense. Is that
We
right?
did, yeah.
All right, so we're talking about even rezoning that property into multiple rezonings.
Can you do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be
You
another
haven't-
question.
You have an approved townhome.
You've seen the country club lot. There's multiple zones on there. We can do it. We don't like to do that, but we can do it. But yeah, you can see, you're right. We're showing on the tradition site, we're showing different land use. So we didn't make this all commercial because we knew that Cadell, we were trying to respond, we were trying to line up both sides of the street with residential. So that's why you have this transitioning to single-family residential. Again, the commercial here, where's the appropriate break line? I mean, the only thing I was potentially concerned with are 2 things. One, with this road dumping out right here, and if we were going to go with this landform, this type of use, I had thought that the appropriate land use would be to pull that into the vacant lots, with potentially what you would do is there's 1 lot, so you take the lot on the south part and you retain that as residential, knowing that that would be a new construction, that those people would potentially be moving into that area, knowing that there's going to be commercial to the south.
Well, I mean, people
Not
that
an
live
existing
along
lot.
Rattlesnake, I mean, I know that the streets come in, you know, the Medlin and so forth. But they'll be bordering on commercial also, won't they?
Aren't they
I've lived
already?
next to commercial side. As long as you, generally, if you buffer it appropriately, to me, it's been a non-issue. Especially when you're moving into the more urban environment, when you're moving into an area where you're seeing more commercial, things like that, you can buffer that and people have that expectation.
Well, I agree with that. Unfortunately, the terrain is such that from Cadell down
Yep.
to Magnolia, it's actually a drop.
You're correct.
So you overlook,
You're correct.
you know, the thing behind you.
Well, and for me, the number one concern that I have on this whole area plan right here, well, two, I guess, second is that I don't feel like we have a good plan currently, and so it's almost like you failed a plan. But really, my largest concern past that is that we've got a lot of this residential neighboring and mixing use with the commercial, and I'm really hoping that we can utilize the form-based codes to help really blend that together, make it a livable space, making it not as abusive on the residential areas, and specifically those who already live there. And I think that's my interest and my concern, and something I'm looking to really drive forward in any sort of recommendation. And I'm just hoping that we can get there, and I'm hopeful that we are. I really think that we can utilize some form-based codes to do that.
Not a silver bullet.
What's that?
It's not a silver bullet for all, we can't cure all ills. We still have, I mean, we have a code where we have pretty good, I think we have pretty good buffers, especially when it comes to parking lots, but Jack is right.
Yeah.
How do you buffer that?
There's
I mean,
some
that's
topography
a little
involved,
bit
yeah.
more difficult to buffer. So maybe that's where you do a conditional zoning, and you go, all right, come up with some ways to buffer it. We start to look at the lighting of the place. We start to look at where where some of the activity coming out of that building could be emanating to the south, or to the west, and we eliminate that.
Well,
So-
and while generally speaking, I agree, we want to look at parking behind in order to keep the facade of the street kind of reflecting the charm that we've all come to appreciate. I wonder if in that particular area, it makes sense to put the parking behind. One, with the views, two, with the lights, three, safety issues, for the homeowners.
Street parking.
But then you're gonna put it right
We
into
did.
the house.
This is kind of dreaming as well, to kind of along your point here, but this is me dreaming the result. But, we talk about topography and we discuss, some sort of construction mix. I mean, if we had those homes right there on that backside of Cadell, currently today, that's where a pretty big drop is. And I think it's a good snow, sledding area currently, right? So, so
heavily
when we talk
vegetated.
about building some residential homes in there, at the very least, there's going to be some difficulties there for the home construction. And so that's not of our concern, but it could create some further runoff concerns, just trying to forecast some of the horizon. But, I mean, if that is parking in the rear, then that can be mitigated. But, from the owner of the land standpoint, I think it's going to be, in my opinion, in my low-level opinion, it's going to be kind of difficult to create the result when we're breaking up the zonings. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And, specifically, from a selling standpoint from the owner there of what he's ultimately going to do. But
I
it's
guess with-
doable.
I agree with you.
Can I just
No,
jump
please.
in one thing on the land use, and then I want to get, we need to bring this to a conclusion as far as a recommendation with this. When we as planners, we're taught, we try and look at both sides of the road when we're planning, and we try and match up the land uses, again, on both sides of the road. When we see what we're trying to achieve on the east side of the road, we took a look at it, and we thought, commercial, maybe because of the land use on the east side, because when you have an intense land use on the east side, that lesser intense use of a single family could be potentially affected by that. So I think that was in our mode of thinking. It's still our mode of thinking, but if the ultimate recommendation is we'd like to go back to your original rendering, we want to go back to your original rendering, we like this better, that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to argue that point. If there is that preference, I'm fine with that preference. I
It
still
also,
think
re-
that
it also respects the plans that have been put in place now for 15 years.
plans
Good
change,
point.
Jack. We know that.
Well,
I mean,
but something we got to
plans
discuss
always-
as a board. I
Plans
mean,
always evolve and change. We know that. But you're
Can
right. All right. Who's
You go, son, you haven't said as much.
Thank you. I agree with Jack and Jeremy. I think we need to think about the land use plans that we have in place. And I know you're new to the area and your job is the professional planner, but I think we also need to consider the people who have been here, who moved here for specific reasons. We got to think about Southern Pines and all the commercial stuff they're doing over there, which is, I'm sure everybody kind of agrees, has ruined a lot of that beautiful land there. How much commercial are we going to have in Pinehurst? I mean, most of the places are going to go over there. So what exactly are you going to attract here? Another golf shop, maybe? But I think the club can handle all that. They don't need another golf shop. I mean, what was your thinking in this? I'm kind of like,
As far as what?
all this commercial there. I mean, we're having more people that want to live here because of the community, not because of the commercial.
Well, the commercial adds to the vitality of a community as well, depending
Oh,
on the type
we
of
have enough
commercial.
with the club. Don't worry about it.
That's not
The
what we,
hotel,
that's,
the
that-
hotel, the club, all that is pretty viable, and even though they're not building right now, but, I mean, people are not coming to Pinehurst to shop. Well, I know, but I mean, but what I said, we have enough of those, and those are doing fine, but how much more are you going to put in? And then are you going to have them vacant because the rents are so high and they're not going to make it? Then you're going to have another whole ballgame there. I mean, look how long some of the shops were empty in the village.
Well, we can have some more real estate offices, I think.
That's
Probably-
right, we need
probably
a few more of those.
so the concept, so what I'm hearing, and keep that in mind when we start to talk about Pinehurst South, should we line every bit of this with more residential then?
I think so. I mean,
Okay,
you want to
all right.
have a new library, you're building all the parks, you're doing all this stuff. I mean, you're headed towards, to me, residential and not commercial.
We're trying to get
Commercial-
that balance.
Commercial doesn't mean you can't develop residential, it's the type of residential. So if the ground floor is a commercial use, and you can use that for an office, a bakery, butcher, whatever it is, you can still do residential above. I mean, that would be, then you still have people, you improve the walkability, you give an option for people to, utilize the rest of the village space. When it comes to the, considering the neighboring landowners, we're talking about essentially 3 or 4 lots that are directly impacted by this part of the development. To me, that's not enough to change sort of the harmony that would be achieved by, again, matching what's on each side of the street. The whole other side of the street is commercial use. Now, that would probably be the heavier commercial based on the buildings that are already there. They're already larger, whether they're torn down, redeveloped, cleared, whatever it might be. But that whole section there already has that commercial feel to it. And again, by still allowing sort of the single-family residential on Cadell and on, what is that, McCaskill, I don't think you eliminate it, but by offering the commercial option, it's more harmonious to what's going right across the street there.
Did that much better than I did, David. Thank you. But I understand all, I mean, we've still got to hear from, that's, Sonia, we heard. Got Philip, you've been quiet.
Pretty much everything I've said has been said. I don't think we need to worry about people's headlights shining in people's windows. Honestly, that's not our problem. If somebody wants to build a house there and it's residential, that's their issue to look into, not to be laissez-faire on it, but again, I don't think that's something for us to consider. I mean, I can state opinion, but opinion's not going to do anything other than express my opinion. So, I mean, I like the idea of commercial downstairs, residential upstairs, fill in the back of that property with residential, and call it a day. I mean, it's a small enough area, but if the ultimate goal is to have consistency in the type of architecture, which we can't control at the state level because residential can't be controlled, we need to put commercial at the bottom and implement the form-based code.
What he said.
I have another thought, but I'm not sure if it's related.
What?
we're moving out of Village Place, or are we moving
No,
to something different?
we're
in Village
not
Place?
moving, we're not moving to Pioneer South today.
No, not yet.
I mean, on this question, I guess I could go either way. With the green space in between Cadell and Magnolia, that to me seems to serve as a little bit of a break. Also, the power company across on Magnolia.
You're talking
That,
about this?
yeah, I mean, that and the brewing company are really the two, what is now commercial, so the feel of that street
Banner. Yep.
isn't totally commercial, so a mixed use would fit. I mean, they got cornhole out there by the brewery, so what do you want across the street? You could have a house, sure. I mean, that to me fits the look of Pinehurst. Is it mixed use? I mean, I think either one could be comfortable, but I wouldn't make the whole block commercial, and I don't think that's the intention. I mean, right now it's village residential, so you could have multifamily there. So we're really talking about, like you said, 3 lots, changing those. I like your idea of maybe giving that bottom lot, which is undeveloped, back to residential if you're gonna go commercial, and then leaving those top 2. But I think it would need to fit with residential to fit with the rest of that street. I have a separate comment about golf carts.
Let's go ahead.
Since
You got me
Louise
curious.
Since Louise isn't here. I've just really been struck by her comment from our last meeting, and I was thinking about, as I was reading through the section 4 again, you know, particularly with roads that are we gonna extend this, or is it gonna be a path? I mean, now would be the time to give consideration, not to making another plan, but, you know, how do we give the option for golf cart shared paths or only? I mean, do you have shared golf cart and pedestrian paths? That seems dangerous.
No, it's
Okay.
dangerous.
So it'd have to be dedicated for golf carts?
Or you'd have to have a wide enough path where you can separate those two uses enough. I don't have a lot of experience with shared golf cart. I've experience with shared pedestrian bicycle paths.
Right.
But not because that's a motorized vehicle that can be hitting upper 20s, and that's a lot of momentum if you hit somebody. So,
Yeah. You're talking about a golf cart or a bicycle? Because,
bicycle,
yeah.
I was going to say.
car's a little bit much. So,
brother
all
on his
right,
bike,
golf
he'll
cart.
take
So,
you
no, I haven't really thought about that.
I mean, is it something we should have written somewhere at this phase at some point of in the desire to have a type of street or a type of access? Is there one that has a golf cart dedicated space?
Aren't our roads in the village already golf cart friendly
Yes, they are.
by code? So do we need a special
They're-
dedicated space?
You mean wide enough?
Oh, the village, you can ride on any road.
Oh, you
the
ride
village
right in
with
the
a golf
lane.
cart.
You can, but are they, I mean, like, you could
Natural
ride
traffic
bikes
calming.
down any road, but is it wide enough for it to, like, actually be inviting for people to do that?
I never feel, this is where I drive around.
And I know you're a biker.
No, I'm everything. Biker, motorcycle, golf cart. So we take our golf cart down here all the time. You want to see me? I'll be around this area this weekend. So we take our golf cart everywhere in this community, pretty much everywhere. Village core to this area, Rattlesnake, McIntyre. It's comfortable. We feel comfortable.
Yeah, okay,
We're never,
okay.
we never feel uncomfortable. Now, the people behind us might be uncomfortable when we're going up a hill.
Well, that's part
So-
of it. That's part of it.
so
That's part of the
it's-
charm.
It's traffic calming. It slows the traffic going through the neighborhood. So as you get out into the hinterlands potentially, could we figure out a way to have some shared paths? That's something we'd have to look at as part of a mobility plan, multi-mobility plan.
Yeah, because I think it's more, like Louise was saying, there's certain places that you can't easily get to,
Well,
crossing.
Number 9 to the village. I mean, if people want to do that, or 6 to the village, having to go through
Village Acres.
Village Acres, but I think what I took from Louise's comments were not in this area. There
Right,
are
she was talking about
other-
the Village
yeah,
South.
Other areas where that's, potentially something to be addressed because it hasn't been considered yet. But I didn't take it as applying
Right.
to this.
I mean, I see people
section.
driving golf carts to Cannon Park and parking there, and that's awesome. But there's a lot of residential right around there, so if it's, okay.
I don't want to,
This area is, I think we have a pretty good circulation because, you've got a grid almost established over here. So you've got a grid pattern in the area. So I think it's pretty well connected. There are some areas where we show do we need to extend, like along Rattlesnake, a pedestrian sidewalk. Now, if you want to walk down Rattlesnake, how do you're going on the side of the road. So, I mean, the plan shows that, the plan shows a schematic to take it from McCaskill up to 211. It's already there in parts of it, from Fields all the way up to 211, or to some extent. It does connect. So Rattlesnake, we want to connect. So if we get to that part of the plan where we talk about enhancing the pedestrian circulation system, it's in this plan.
But to your point, Matt, and what I think, I want to use that as an example, is if that becomes a recommendation that we would want to add on to the plan to council, then ultimately it could be. Is that right? I mean, as an example standpoint. So when we start discussing a topic like that, and we could be I would like it to be more specific, but it could be as vague as we want it to become a little bit more golf cart centric and golf cart circulating. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I have an idea.
Couple more now.
I have an idea, so.
Okay. Or, to your point you made right before that, we can't start over, right? Okay, or it'd be so difficult. We can't go lot by lot by lot, determine what we ultimately, how we want it to be zoned. So we have two decent starting points from the detailed plans, and we could make recommendations specific to one plan or the other. This plan, but change this plan, but make it a little bit more golf cart circulating this street along the points. And that was kind of the point I've been trying to make in our meetings. And I felt like that was a great example that ultimately we could do is from a recommendation standpoint. And whether or not we want to make golf carts that or not, but we could.
Mm-hmm. Well, and isn't the greatest thing we can give ourselves now for the future is the flexibility to decide, like say for this Magnolia side street, that if it's mixed use, that we have the option in the future to say, as it's been built out, we see now that we could go either way with these two lots. I mean, is there a way to do that with conditional use, or like you were saying earlier?
Zoning can always be changed. So say we establish a regulating plan that shows those three lots as a residential villa, cottage, whatever, and they sit there for the next 25, 50 years. It doesn't mean that somebody can't come back and go through the process like we do change the zoning. It can be done. So that can be done. It'll go through the public hearing, the legislative process. So is there a hurry? There's not, if we want to back that off, I just need to come to consensus to change the land use in this area, or to further refine it down. I'm open to it. But I need to know. I need to know, because I'm going to be asking you for a recommendation, hopefully relatively soon. So if this is a sticking point, if this is something that we need to come together on, and we still haven't yet, we're going to need to do that in the very near future.
You may know better than anyone, but it's far more difficult to rezone commercial back into residential than residential into commercial, at least from my limited experience.
Depends on market, depends on location. It really does. If the residential is hot, like everybody seems to think it is, and it is hot, that wouldn't be, I think we've had some people approach us, I think wanting to go from commercial back to residential. I think so. But it's not undone depending on it. Like if somebody wants to come in and change it to an RMF, multiple family, there's a residential, from a commercial to a residential potentially. It just depends on the market and depends on the community. Some communities will go, yeah, I want to do it. Some communities actually will downzone certain areas from commercial back to residential. This state, it's getting more difficult to, because sometimes it's considered a taking, but it can be done, and it's done. But you're right. So if we zone it right now, residential, put the regular, we don't even have to touch those lots. Right. There's areas that we don't, if we don't feel we want to address it, which I don't think I think we should address it in some way. We're not required to as part of the regulating plan.
I understand.
You had a point. Did you want to share that point, or you had an idea?
Oh, yeah, when Matt was talking, I think we also have to firm up ourselves, if we're going to move forward with these plans, what are elements that we need to implement. There's some implementation in here, but I don't think it's not fully fleshed out. So there's things like we might need to, say we need to put a road here, or we need to improve golf cart mobility. Those are things I think that we can, as a group, again, sit down and talk about what do we want to see implemented as we go forward? I mean, I think that's something, again, we need to sit down as a group to do, and we can do that as part of the plan or as an addendum to the plan.
I'm wondering, what was the nature of the last conversation y'all had with the Says? I reached out to them this week, but they're in France. So I'm like, nice. I'm just wondering where were conversations, if you can say, and if not, that's fine too.
Well, last time I think we had a conversation, I think his vision was more of single-family units on those lots. Yep. That was,
Certainly would be harmonious to that
It's
area.
changed.
That would be really nice, actually.
That changed
That
from
could
what
be on village mixed use.
my conversation's 18 months old, so.
you can go in there, yeah.
Or a little bed and breakfast. I mean,
So we have at least 3 different options here.
I mean, like I said, I've heard differing, Jack's heard different things. So I don't know. Ultimately, right now, the zoning would allow for single family. Allows for the townhouses, that kind of thing. So
You don't think the zoning, at this point, it certainly wouldn't allow
Yeah.
for single family, right?
it would allow for,
oh, yeah.
Or it would
yeah.
allow for single family currently.
Multiple family includes 1, right?
that's VR, right?
Yeah.
Was the land use say, it does say single family down here.
Yeah.
Let's go to, 8.5, go to 8.5.
What is the approved on the record density allowed for that parcel?
I think there's 16 units on there.
16 units,
I think there's
okay.
16 to 20 somewhere. Yeah, VR allows single family.
Higher density.
And that's all historic district as well.
So I don't know where this goes, but to an earlier point, if this can be on a list, I mean, is the realignment of the intersection of Rattlesnake and Magnolia something that in a plan could be considered? I mean, I know we just redid one side of the intersection, and how do we keep that curvilinear, but also improve line of sight there?
That's a design and construction issue that's going to be out of our kind of a.
Down at the bottom of the hill here, right?
Well, right by the gas station at
Oh,
Cannon
no,
Park.
that's,
Oh,
Yeah.
you're talking way up there, yeah, that,
got 2 bad intersections.
really, only 2?
It's no bargain down at the bottom of the hill either, yeah.
True.
All
But
right,
at least you got stop signs there.
And hopefully everybody is educating themselves, if we haven't yet, on the historical results as well, and how that could affect, certainly inside the historical district, even though we're not that board. So we start talking about the curvature of the streets, and we start talking about realigning intersections. We just don't want to affect that. What about?
so, we've been spending a while on this. Again, we're going to be moving forward with the plan. You're going to ask to look at a plan, it's going to have this image in it. What is is there a recommendation that you want to make as a group? We've talked through it. I don't have a strong feeling either way at this point, so Philip?
I have a question.
Okay.
So this is historic district, correct? So what is, just fill me in as an ignorant party, what does new construction within the historic district look like? What process does that take?
Major COA, so it goes through to.
They have to go through that?
And we have some pretty specific guidelines for the
Yeah.
HBC for single family. Commercial it's not as prescriptive. I think the form-based code is to be more prescriptive than the standards in the guidelines right now. But there are standards out there. So what would happen is any development that's going to go through here, the way it currently sits, is it goes through the HBC for the congruity test.
Okay, that's what
I mean, there's enough prescriptive information as far as roof forms, facades, building materials, and so forth, types of windows and so forth, that it would generally go through the process of making sure that it's congruous.
So you wouldn't be concerned?
No.
You'd be fine, okay.
No.
If Jack's not concerned, I'm good.
Remember, the historic district doesn't cover the entire area. So,
I know, just this, I'm just talking about this.
yep. So it's really,
We're not voting on anything today, though.
What would help you? Do we need to come to any sort of consensus on this today?
you should.
Okay, are you talking about the plan? Hopefully you're not talking about the plan as a whole, right? Or
No, because we have,
Yeah. So are you talking about this specific conversation of what should be involved in Magnolia?
yeah.
Okay, all
It
right, so
really-
maybe
It really becomes that, because
Yeah.
again, we're going to move this plan forward,
Okay?
and you're going to make a recommendation to council. Council, you're going to say to council, we'd recommend this plan, but we're in general support of the plan, but we recommend these specific actions. Change the land use along Magnolia from commercial as shown on the, commercial land use as shown on the west side of Magnolia to single family or to townhouses or something else.
I second that motion.
Yeah, I was gonna,
Well-
single homes for perfect.
Can we do it in terms of zoning? So can we say, what about making it mixed use?
That's what we're talking about right now, because right now,
It could be
right now
both then.
zoning is not coming into play right now. Zoning will come to play after we pass this plan, because after we pass this plan, and it says single-family residential on those lots, the plan that you're going to see is going to show single-family residential building forms in that area.
But that could be a mixed-use zoning, so we could still give ourselves the option in the future.
That is, you always have a different option in the future. You just have to go through a different process. You have to go back through the process.
I'd recommend maintaining the current zoning on those 3 lots pending further review in the future, depending upon how the plan evolves.
Well, let's do
Okay.
this. Let's do this real quick. Let's take a little slight straw poll of what we each would recommend for specifically Magnolia, because that's kind of what we're coming down to. And, sorry to make
I
you
just stated
regurgitate.
mine.
So I was going to say, if you're sorry to have you regurgitate yours, but,
Can I ask Jack?
no,
Jack-
please, go ahead.
Jack, you said those 3 lots. What about the lots to the north of that from
Oh, yeah.
the 3 residential lots north to the Tradition site?
The north, they're part of the Traditions parcel.
Yes.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
Can you use your pointer
Is
to
commercial?
show me exactly
commercial,
what you're
yes.
talking
Okay.
about?
All right. Jack so we're talking about these 3 lots here that Jack says recommending.
Currently zoned
Yeah.
residential,
Yes,
R10.
yes.
And which, in the north here,
Well-
is zoned residential, but we're showing potential mixed use, we're showing potential commercial in this area.
In
Okay.
the
On the
lots,
Tradition
the
side.
lot parcels
Yep.
to the north of
Yes.
that, correct?
Yes, I got it, yep.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm getting this. All right, so if we look there at the map, I see J,
Yes,
and we have a proposed street running above it, correct?
yes.
What we are saying is, across from J and below that street, having those 3 lots be residential,
Retaining the residential.
retaining their current zoning.
Yep.
And then above, those lots that are shown, yes, there and there, as mixed use, having those be mixed use.
Mixed use or potentially even single family again. I mean, we could allow both of those in there. So what you're saying, what Jack was saying was, okay, here are your 3 lots right here. Keep these the same. Allow mixed use or even single family above that. Right?
what's that right there that your cursor's on now?
That could be a multiple family building. Probably a multiple family, it probably wouldn't be an office building.
It was, okay.
And it might be worth noting on the preferred plan, that third building, it kind of betrays the parcel boundaries there. So that third building, right up from where the leader is, that says commercial infill, that one is actually up in the larger parcel that's zoned village residential right now.
The one on
So- No,
McCaskill?
the third one up. So right
This
above
one.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
that
one.
one's in the
Yeah,
larger parcel.
yeah, this is on the
So it's
Tradition
only
site.
showing 2 houses on there, but that's actually over 3 lots. Those
It
are the
is,
3
because it's
lots.
commercial, because the 3 lots are really, they're residentially sized lots.
Right.
Right.
So to put a commercial on there, you'd have to combine them of some sort or do it some type of exempt
Okay.
plat.
Jack, do you feel,
Jack, so if you'll
Building your
make that
point.
recommendation.
I tell you what, I believe he is. Sonia, won't you go ahead and start, fill it, and then we'll kind of come around, and if Jack has
This
anything else to
is-
say, you can do it.
And we need to come to a conclusion on this, because this is a significant point with this plan.
It is, I mean, this is kind of what it's coming down to, so
Do you want him to restate what he said, and then we can decide?
It's not a
a
motion.
motion.
No, but
Yeah.
that we agree, all
I-
agree to his,
Informally do
What I
this.
would like at this point in time is your opinion of what needs to happen on the Magnolia Street as well as Area F. Just any input, so when we come to the point of making some movement on
I'm gonna
it,
get-
that we feel that we are going to be able to get some consensus to do so.
well, I think we should leave Magnolia, as Jack said, leave it as it is.
Okay?
Three particular
The
lots.
three
that are
particular
zoned
lots, correct,
Okay,
correct. And I'm
And
fine
then-
with,
anything else?
Okay.
fine with the rest of it, but I
Okay.
think those three lots need to stay.
Okay, so this landform, take out these two buildings, we go back to this, for these three lots.
Right.
And then for the plan, those three lots, we just pull those out, and this type of landform, we could allow for this type of landform in that area, this type of use, which could also include single-family. That's how I think I'd build the regulated plan, to
and/or
allow them both.
commercial, right?
Okay, all right.
Philip? Any input?
This is extremely helpful, by the way. Just
Okay.
Just so you know.
Well, we're pushing it.
I need this.
I'm middle of the road with the three lots. If we want to keep them residential, that's fine. I would personally like to see mixed use north of that, but I don't own the property, so, you know, I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. I think if we're gonna be congruous and have everything similar down there, I think a natural walking path down there with some mixed use would be nice. That's with residential and the rest of it on the back end.
Yep. I'm going to agree that I like the idea if what we're trying to do is to create a vibrant, for lack of a better word, atmosphere that sort of reflects what is beginning to be established between the manor and the brewery, having some type of mixed use to the north end there on Magnolia really makes sense. Whether it's commercial below and multifamily above, that makes sense to me. If those three lots, if folks feel more comfortable having that stay residential, I don't have a ton of heartburn over that. That's fine. You know, particularly the bottom two, the one that is directly across from the brewery, I don't know why that needs to be a
Different.
yeah, I don't know why that lot needs to be residential. I wouldn't want to live there, but if somebody else would, that's fine. But if I don't have a considerable heartburn if it feels better to folks having the lower part of that Magnolia Strip remaining residential. I wonder if it should be 2 or 3. I like 2 better, but.
Yeah, I would maintain the current residential zoning on those 3 lots and pull them out of the plan for now. And I would advocate either or, commercial or multifamily in the large parcel to the north of it, commercial being along Magnolia and potentially multifamily and or single family, depending upon which works out better for the remaining part of the parcel, excuse me.
Okay.
David, you prepared?
Yeah, I don't believe that they should remain residential. I think it's more congruous with the rest of the plan there to allow for that commercial use. Again, not exclusively commercial. You could still use the mixed use for residential above, whatever it may be. I think another thing to consider is these pictures aren't how it's going to look necessarily. It allows that to happen, but who's to say, 3 buildings might not go exactly like that. There could be more green space than what's shown there. The developers may, however it happens, may take it upon themselves to include more green space or more buffer between what's put there and the existing residences. So I think allowing that use for the future development in that area is probably more beneficial and more important at this time.
Thank you.
I agree with what Jack said.
Okay, as well. So just,
May I ask a quick question on those? The current owners, have they indicated what they plan to do with them? Certainly that's part of the equation, but landowners can do what they want as long as it follows zoning, et cetera. But has there been any indication
I've not heard.
since it was a recent change of hands as of less than a year ago? Okay.
So my feeling and thought is it's a little different than we are, but my feeling and thought is we probably should run residential as far up Magnolia as we could. I don't, because I'm more interested in the harmonious workings between the two. Now, that doesn't mean that I would be against any sort of mixed-use develop, or mixed-use zoning in that area. However, I would ultimately feel to keep the 3 lots residential. I like the idea of the residential zoning in the golf cart track area. I'm also interested in the opportunity to, the corner of Magnolia and McCaskill there, in that larger building that's being depicted, in some possible mixed-use, commercial type zoning there that would create that walkability commercial underneath, and then some possible multifamily above, as long as we were able to utilize the form-based codes in that area to again make it look correctly.
No, and my thought is, Jeremy, if it was only that one building that was going to have that character, you lose the draw to go there. Business needs a little bit of consolidation so that businesses can feed off of each other. Yep. And otherwise, I'm not going to schlep myself on over to take my watch to get repaired if that's all I can do there. The reason why, not that we need to become downtown Southern Pines, but the reason why that thrives is you can drive in there, park, walk around, do your business, spend an afternoon. You've got friends visiting from out of town. You can go grab lunch. You can pop in the shop. You can go over and pick up your knitting supplies. I can drop off my watch. I can, So commercial businesses really do benefit from not being in a ghost town. So if there's any at all, I think we need to have the opportunity for there to be enough that the businesses can feed each other and help each other out.
Along that same line was kind of my idea of being that the only mixed-use point. And I could be wrong, and I don't think I'm going to get us to a point to where that's really our zoning. I'm just throwing it out as kind of conversation points. Because my idea being that that's more of 6 or 8 commercial spots, still have some walkability to them and from them, and some relatively good parking around them. But in creating the residential lot surrounding it, and making it walkable and approachable from those residential units, then I kind of see, trying to get to the same result you mentioned, I kind of see a little bit more back and forth, maybe a little bit more neighborhoodly commercial, where someone from Southern Pines isn't going to make that their destination into our community, but really supporting that area from a residential standpoint. And then also not over flooding our downtown area for further commercial that may not be utilized. It was my main thought. So, in my mind, again, I'm wrong because it's not my expertise, but I see commercial construction and commercial building really being relative to how much money is being loaned for that type of environment today. And I do see areas a lot of times where you build it, they will come, but then it sits empty or it becomes something a little bit different. And so that was my mindset, just not really over flood or downtown area with commercial. So what's the right balance is, I think, is really the result, and I think your point's correct too.
I think the form-based code is what's going to allow this area to resemble the core of the village that we have. And the current core, the way I view it, is we have the theater building, we have the other shops, restaurants. That's not residential. If we're trying to further that character and kind of draw that character into this new development area, you look at the uses that are available there, and I think that more of it's commercial at that time, and I think that's harmonious with the surrounding residential tone that's also there. I think, again, people, if they come from out of town and they hear about the village of Pinehurst and how charming and you know, the historic feel, everything that's happened there. They come and, you know, they do a loop, and it's like, all right, well, we're done. You know, and that's why people leave. That's why not much time is spent in the village. There's not enough of a draw there to keep people there, you know, for an extended period of time. I think this,
Days and things like that.
yeah,
restaurants.
I think this allows that charm to kind of spread to this area.
Which I thought that was kind of the goal from day one, to kind of connect the two areas. I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody walking down the street. You know, if I'm walking past, you know, the manor and all I see is houses the rest of the way, am I even going to look down there? I mean, you know, obviously we need wayfinding signs,
Yes,
and it's a whole other
wayfinding.
discussion. But you need something to draw the folks down there.
You do, and the disconnect is really between what? Between the Pinecrest, no, not even Pinecrest. Well, a little bit between Pinecrest, and it's dark, so you get out there at night until you get down to Magnolia, and you get really near the brewery where you start to see the street lights. That's where you start to pick it up again, but you can't really tell that there's a lot going on just from the road, from the lighted road itself.
Extending it down Magnolia would be helpful, because that comes up to the manor, but also the cut through that you have between sections J and K. I don't think that needs to be a thoroughfare for vehicles, but even if that connection made it more pedestrian friendly to get through to the new networks that are going on there,
That's
that
the
would
idea.
also be beneficial.
And I'm going to take a super wild guess here, but I imagine commercial district through that entire stretch would probably provide a larger tax base for these civic areas discussed earlier to support building out of those versus residential.
Well, the plan actually noted that greater revenues come from residential than from commercial.
They do. Oh.
In section 5, it talked about that. That's right. I learned something.
So,
Although I know that's the point that Jack has an objection to, is that
Uh,
2017 plan.
so before we move on to that, so we're okay with this landform here, right? We want this as single family, right? This we want as single family between Cadell, McCaskill, this area. That's transition.
Kind of consensus that as a board. I think that's one consensus we've got.
Now, the other point that Jack had raised, whether it's appropriate for a hotel in this area. And I know you've heard that, yeah. Yeah.
Recommendation on it, because currently it's in the plan, right?
It's in the plan. I'm just, you know, what are
Take it out
the
a little.
initial thoughts of
Well,
what, you know?
one preliminary question I have is, are we aware of what kind of market research has been done
Yes.
in regard to that?
Yes,
Please share.
we have that. I just don't have that market analysis in front of me.
Yeah.
But we do have a market analysis.
And how current is that? Is that the 2017?
No,
No.
it's on, we have a project site. So the market analysis is on the project site. And it does say, I think that 60 to 80 rooms was,
It's definitely speculative. I mean, it depends on the type of hotel, whether it's a boutique hotel, whether it's a chain, whether it's.
That's what it'd
You know,
be.
there's 20 different parameters probably that
Sure,
could go
sure.
into that decision.
Sure. But, you know, I do know that during high season, the resort is packed. You know, you can't get a room.
The other,
So the idea that we have enough is sort of like, well, how do you define enough? Do you mean enough to meet the market need, or as much as you want to see here? You know, it's like, what does enough mean?
Well, the dilemma is hotel and/or mixed-use residential above. I mean, someone would argue that, you know, we want people to be living in this area, you know, above the stores and so forth. Should we use up all this space for a hotel type of rooms?
well, we're not going to use up all the space.
I mean, we can't have it both ways.
But we're not going to use up all the space.
I know.
There's going to be plenty of space in there.
Some percentage of the space.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, is there room in the market? There probably, based on the market analysis, there probably is. Based on the comments and every council work session we've been having about short-term rentals, we know that there's a lot of short-term rental. So does that indicate that there's availability in the market? I don't know.
Well, a hotel is definitely a short-term rental.
Well, I was also sort of reflecting on the fact that there is a push amongst certain members of our community to limit short-term rentals. And then I see, a reflected opinion that we don't need a hotel downtown. And I'm thinking, all right, where are all these people going to stay? There's a little bit of, it's very hard to have it both ways and remain a thriving resort community. The people need to sleep somewhere.
How many rooms is the Manor and the Pinecrest? Does anyone know?
And the Magnolia's got some rooms too.
Magnolia's what, 10?
Yeah, Magnolia's not. That's more of a B and B, but it does
60, I
have
would
some.
say 60-ish, Manor 60-ish, I can't recall.
That many, I think
I'll
so.
look it up,
But less
hold
than
on.
that?
So it would be, what we're considering is something similar in scale to the Manor, probably.
I think the idea is that it's a boutique style hotel. I mean, I think you can use the Manor as a model. You could use Pinecrest as a model. I think the Holly's probably a little large, but
But don't forget that if the club does what they want to do, there's more rooms there too.
if,
Well, except they've put a hold on that.
Well, but that is something you need to consider if you're thinking long-term.
all right, so we circle back on it. There's strong feelings, no strong feelings. It was just something, just a consideration.
So I don't want to drop this in a little, is there opportunity to drop a hotel into Pinehurst South? That's probably too late to the game, but hotel area.
No, I think they said either or. It could happen either or. Is it more likely here as a boutique? I don't think you're going to get a boutique hotel on Pinehurst South. I just don't see that happening. And I don't know if there's a need in that, really, if there's a need in that area.
Yeah, good
You
point.
know.
I just see
You're
as.
15501. It's out at 15501.
I believe that, I kind of believe all the points that Jules stated. However, I think the risk of zoning an area as hotel brings further pressures, okay? And at first, it brings density pressures, it brings building height pressures that they're going to ask for changes on. And I think it brings a risk to our village of a certain level of commercialism that's maybe not today, but further down the calendar of some large chain opportunity and purchases that then come with not only different pressures, but with a little bit more money to cause the concerns. And so that's my biggest concern. I think the need's there. I think to keep our village vibrance possibly there, I think the risk is pretty great.
Well, right now in that area, it's zone VMU, you could put a hotel right now. It's a
Good,
permitted-
right there
it's a-
today.
It's a
Okay.
permitted use right now.
The Manor is 43, by the way.
43?
I mean, I think if we like the core right now and we look at this area, there's hotels there in that area. I mean, you would have one, like in this current plan, you've got that mixed-use hotel retail possible on the corner of that new intersection. I mean, that's opposite on that same quadrant from the Manor, so it makes sense. Again, if we're not looking at zoning, although there's options with the zoning, but we're just looking at it, if you show a smaller size boutique-type hotel there, and then, but not a, can you make it that and not have it be a Hampton?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, well then,
Well, I mean,
maybe
use,
it's
use,
worth showing it.
use design standards for that. Use the high enough design standards that that's not going to occur. You limit the height of the building. I think there's all
Come
there's
into
all
play.
types of limitations that you can do with the form-based code and some of the underlying things that they're not going to have an interest in coming into this market and doing that.
Well, there's also a risk today that either one of our hotel communities already down there that becomes a Hampton later in time. So, that risk is always there. So, against my own point.
I can see with the form-based code limiting height and the design standards and so forth, that you could pretty much, I wouldn't call it force, whatever the right word is, make incentives to build the type of hotel that would be appropriate for the area. And I can see that happening. That makes sense to me.
And if we're involved in some extent, if any of that's on part of our property or property that we can acquire, then we control
Correct.
we control that as part of that RFP process.
It's also more of a multi-use space. I mean, have another restaurant. I mean, the Manor's done a great job with the North-South Lounge, another potential venue space. It's, you know, a hotel in name, but I think more possibilities than that.
And so I think we've come to some general consensus on two of these things, so I'm very happy, thank you. This image, any other concerns on this particular image from anybody? And then we can move through other portions of this of this small area plan. We haven't looked at the pedestrian and open plan, we haven't looked at any of that stuff. So if we need to, we can. We're running up to the 2 hours. I'll stay a little bit longer, but you're starting to, after 2 hours, you start to lose me a little bit. So
I will reference, the market analysis report does indicate that an additional hotel at Village Place could be favorable.
And help build out.
Yep.
I think a boutique hotel is, you know, is somebody going to build a boutique hotel? Is somebody going to do that? That's the big if. Can you make money on a boutique hotel in this area at this point in time? I don't know. So maybe it sits there for a while, or maybe you transition. Unless you say that we want a hotel right here at this corner, then we can hold it up. But if we say it can be a hotel or a mixed use or something else, then we have all those options. But if we're really dying for a hotel at this corner, then there's ways to do it.
I still think a hotel in Pinehurst South with a better connectivity from a walkability standpoint from that area into the village makes a lot of sense. Because then you would have people walking, but again, I don't want to recreate the whole world, so.
I think we need to have more of a shuttle service.
That's why I say we have to recreate the whole world. No, you're not a fan of that one? Not at all, no? Okay.
What was that, David?
If a hotel's going to go at Pinehurst South, I mean, technically walkable, yes. But that's not going to, people aren't going to stay there and utilize the rest of the village like they would if it were located, you know, in this new small area.
Yeah,
I
I
totally
mean,
get
my thought is, and this is just my gut sense, this is based on nothing other than my gut, is in order to get people to stay down there, you would have to lower the rates such that you would end up with a hotel that, you know, is going the direction that you were wanting to avoid. If I'm,
Well, I think that I get your point,
Yeah.
but I think the one at the end of Highway 5, what is that, whatever, I don't think they're fairly inexpensive. The negative then becomes.
Homewood Suites
the
you're talking
Homewood
about in
Suites.
Olmsted?
They're not inexpensive, but then, however, I do see people walking back and forth down Highway 5 from that hotel sometimes, and I know it's pretty dangerous. And so I get it, I'm just throwing it out there as a bomb, so.
And we're not on Pinehurst South.
We're not.
I
there.
know.
All right, so what else do we want to go, do you want me to fly through any of this? Any other discussion? Jack, you had some
No,
other
I-
points?
I just raised up some things that I've heard, and
I think you're right.
overall, I thought that just with the exception of those couple issues,
Okay.
I thought it was very well received, to tell you the truth.
Great. Great.
I'll go on record again for the amphitheater.
Yes, correct. Oh, no, strong, I've noted that, strong. support.
It's still shown on the, isn't it? Oh, here. See, not that plan. Yep, we do. See, right here. Proposed open space and pedestrian network. We're still showing the amphitheater in that area. It can move. You can also see where, you know, this is where, I don't know, the previous ones where we bring Medlin through. We're still showing, showing the pedestrian circulation. We're not showing the road through there.
That's
And then we're
fine.
showing a variety of places just, you know, to extend, especially extend that. It would be nice if we could extend that, a sidewalk network along Rattlesnake. It would just make that area so
Absolutely.
much more walkable. So that's part of the plan.
So in sections GH and K, I guess right around where the hotel and brewery is, the proposed thoroughfare coming in front of the brewery, I think that makes sense because you connect to, you know, the rest of the roads that are there and the rest of the proposed additions. The one that cuts straight through north to south,
This one?
I think potentially limiting that or making that exclusively pedestrian or bicycle thoroughfare would be something to consider.
This one here?
Yeah. Because
That-
that's what's lacking. I think on the proposed one, if you get to the circulation plan, that's a proposed road. But, those roads, driving them now, they're close enough already. I don't think making that a thoroughfare for vehicles necessarily improves the situation any, but being able to cut through while walking or riding a bike, I think it has more benefits.
I think the one issue that you run into, David, with that is the road is here because we can develop along the road.
Yep.
So I think that's,
Yep.
you're going to have that. We're going to have pedestrian going through that area. But I think if you don't put the road there, you don't get any of the potential other users that's going to add to the vitality of the area, which is what we're trying to achieve in that area is vitality.
See plenty of areas and plenty of communities that would fit into ours to where it is a pedestrian walkway with shops on either side of it, and it's pretty vibrant, really.
Depends on the size of the community, how many people are coming through that area. And generally, I think you're seeing, isn't that generally in the larger markets?
Probably, it's a good point. Yeah, so it's something we may not be able to support, really.
Well, you got to have a road somewhere. At some point, there's got to be a road, and you'd have, I think, in order for that to work, you have to have enough density of commercial uses to make that work, to draw the people in.
Got to have
And
a
I'm not
really
sure if-
high level of density in that walkable area
I'm not-
to make it
Because
walk.
that's when I drive in for the day, I park my
Yes.
car, and then I walk.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure if we have that. We wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want that type of square footage down there.
We wouldn't want that density. You don't think it would be pretty contrary to maybe
We
what
talk
we'd
about
want it to
trips
be?
now. Yeah, the more commercial you put, the more trips you're going to generate. So, I mean, we estimate a basic amount of trips, which is, it's a wag.
Yeah, we're seeing how much draw the brewery is, and certainly with our seasonal, golfers, the draw is there. And I think we got to take that as a sampling to what we do. Nelson?
Well, the brewery is one of those things where it demonstrates that there's room in the market to try and go to the brewery anytime after 6 from Wednesday to Sunday.
Also, it's also a county draw. It's not just a Pinehurst draw, and it's not just our seasonal
Oh, yeah.
golfer draw. It's not just our community golf cart
No.
drive draw.
But it just shows that there's room.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we're climbing up on 4 o'clock here.
You're good.
And
Yeah.
I like this. This was a very productive meeting, and we came to I'm really glad we talked through those issues on Magnolia and some of the other issues. I really think we got something accomplished here, so I'm happy. This was a great session. The next session we'll hold it during our regular meeting, because that's coming up in 2.5 weeks or so, 3 weeks, and we'll put Pinehurst South on that, and we'll start talking about Pinehurst South. So I
We'll
wanna
do something similar
Yes.
with Pinehurst South?
I would
at the
love to
next
do
meeting?
something similar. This is great. We'll figure out when we want to put this back on an agenda. I will note that on the 29th, we're doing a mailing, so we're doing an open house that we've mailed directly to all the property owners in both of the areas. Because we've not really heard extensively from any of the property owners that we're going to force this plan upon. So I've heard from them intermittently. Generally, I've gotten support from the people that I've heard, but I've not heard from the small and pop businesses. I've not heard from some of those smaller owners to find out what their opinions are. So it's kind of it's an open house. Drop in, have any questions, and we'll tell you what's going on.
When did you mail those out?
That just came out this week.
Okay.
So it probably went out yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So process-wise, can you help me, what are we expecting from the consultants over the next X number of months? or
Nothing right
weeks?
now.
Nothing at this point
Nothing
in
right
time?
now.
They're waiting to hear kind of our resolution of
Yep.
some issues? Okay.
Yep.
In order to finalize the vision?
Yes.
Okay.
And this vision, if what I'm hearing and when it moves through, there's not a lot of adjustments that hopefully that are radical that I don't need to make
On Village Place.
Right.
it's
Yeah,
definitely-
Pinehurst South, I understand. Let's cross that bridge. But on this one, I'm feeling better, and I'm feeling we're going to move them separately. So I want to take Pinehurst Village Place up, get that moving through the system, and then work on Pinehurst South. And the quicker we get this approved, the quicker we can get to the form-based code.
And so once we have the blessing of the council on a, quote, final plan
Mm-hmm.
vision, then the detail work of zoning and/or form-based code specifics start. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's maybe already kind of in the works now, but I understand. Makes sense.
But based on some of the recommendations, that requires some fine tuning right now.
Got it. Yep.
This is great.
My feeling is, I'm sorry, my feeling is that many of us as board members have some of the further roadblocks in our mind, whether it's for Village Place or Pinehurst South, and I do want to advocate that we go ahead and bubble those up through email, and we don't have to write as long.
I've already bubbled.
Yeah, Jack's bubbled, right? So that's kind of what's going on. I'm just trying to promote that a little bit, because at the end of the day, I do think that was beneficial to get it out there. Let's go ahead and talk about let's talk about the roadblocks, have a discussion on it. I think we're all, I mean, golly, I mean, when I look around to this and I think about the input, we're all knowledgeable enough and capable enough to talk about the specifics of whatever those roadblocks are. So please bubble us up, send it to staff further. I would just encourage us all to be, solution-driven, and that's my only thoughts. Anything else from anybody?
And I would like to add, I mean, you saw the conversation. We were not of one mind. I mean,
Right.
you could hear the different concepts. David had a different, it was great to hear that.
I love
Exchange.
Jules telling me, no way, that ain't gonna happen. He says, no, what the hell would you say? And okay, and I can.
Sonia?
But I think we can accept it as a board. That's our job, right? So, and so, that's okay.
I'd love to talk with you, Sonia. But no, it's great.
What else from anybody? Anybody? Okay. So I think the next item on the agenda was a photo. Is that really correct?
Really?
Photo.
We really
What's
need
going on with that?
Okay.
I'll have to defer to my boss over here.
Can we kind of take it from a seated standpoint, or do you want us like class photo?
Oh, we're missing a couple members. Should we
Yeah,
wait? What's the expectation on that?
Yeah, we don't have a full house.
For our next meeting?
Maybe we can do it on the April meeting in time for the year.
Volunteer launching on April
dress up
6th,
then.
however.
Yeah, we don't meet before the.
6th, and so we wouldn't have another meeting until the 7th. So we wouldn't have the opportunity.
What is that? Oh, what?
Yeah.
Why do we need this? Why are we doing this?
You want to take one kind of as a
Having a good
seated
haircut.
standpoint from us? Is that okay? Or is it?
Darren is too. Look,
No.
haircut.
Kind of a hard at,
Got to be in it.
No, I'm not. What? They don't want me in here.
kind of a hard at work type of photo.
I'm not photogenic. Philip is. Matt is with those
I don't know
lovely
what it
hair.
is.
Wish I had that.
Everybody just want to slide on over and kind of. I can stand. Let's just all stand, I guess. That's what be. Kind of want.
Like a piano shot.
Yeah, we want to kind of.
Oh, I'm short now.
Always look weird.
We'll see it at the luncheon.
All right.
Do you need a motion?
Yep, I was going to say, so as that's the last thing on our agenda, I will ask for a motion to adjourn
Make a motion, we adjourn.
So, second?
by Sonia, second by Jack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.